your retirement calculator crashes right there on your phone screen. You've spent 20 minutes punching in numbers during your lunch break, sitting in your car in a parking lot, with a half-eaten burrito going cold in your lap. You had your current savings, your monthly contribution, your expected return rate. You hit calculate, and the app freezes. Just a spinning wheel, a tiny, meaningless software glitch, and something inside you completely snaps. Not because the app broke, but because for a half second, the universe confirmed what you already suspected. You don't want to see that number. You already know. It is not enough. You already know that $1 million retirement target, the one everyone keeps throwing around, feels about as reachable as swimming to the moon, and a frozen screen on a $1,200 phone just proved how fragile the whole charade really is. Here is the thing about that number: $1 million. It sounds massive. It sounds like generational wealth, like yacht money, like never worrying about anything ever again. But pull out a calculator that actually works and run the basic math. You retire at 65 with $1 million. You follow the 4% withdrawal rule, which is basically financial planning's version of Trust Me, Bro. That gives you $40,000 a year before taxes. Toss in the average Social Security benefit about $1,976 a month as of 2025, and you are looking at roughly $63,700 annually. You are not sailing the Mediterranean. You're clipping coupons at Costco, getting genuinely excited about senior discount night at Denny's. And that is the dream scenario. The people who actually hit the number, because most people aren't even in the same zip code. My name is Penny, and I spend way too much time digging into the math that financial advisors hope you never run. If you've ever stared at your 401k balance and felt your chest tighten, or if you've ever Googled how much you need to retire at 2 a.m. and immediately regretted it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this a thumbs up, because today we're pulling apart the biggest lie in personal finance. I call it the $1 million mirage. This idea that $1 million is the magic threshold between comfortable retirement and eating cat food in a studio apartment. And what I'm about to show you is who actually reaches that number, how they did it, and why the system is designed this way, to make you feel like a failure for not being there yet. Which means 87% haven, even come close. The median retirement account balance for older Americans, aged 55 to 64, is approximately $185,000. For those 65 to 74, it is around $200,000. So if you're sitting there right now feeling like you're behind, you're not behind. You are average, and average is terrifying. That is not an insult aimed at you. That is an indictment of a system that tells people to save $1 million while paying them $55,000 a year and charging them $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. But here is where it gets really interesting, because the people who do hit that $1 million mark, they aren't who you think they are. It is not all tech founders and trust fund kids. Some of them are making the exact same salary as you, living in the same neighborhoods, driving the same beat-up cars. And they cracked something the rest of us missed. Let's tear down the first misconception right now. The idea that $1 million is some universal retirement number. That applies to everyone equally. It doesn't. It never did. That number was popularized in the 80s and 90s, when a dollar stretched a whole lot further. In 1990, $1 million had massive purchasing power, roughly $2.4 million in 2025 dollars. So when your parents' financial advisor slapped that target on a whiteboard in 1995, they were essentially telling them to save the equivalent of $2 million today. Nobody updated the number. The goalposts didn't move. Inflation just quietly ate it alive, while everyone kept chanting the exact same mantra: And that is the first layer of the million-dollar mirage. The number itself is a relic, a complete financial fossil. It is like using a roadmap from 1992 to navigate a city that has been completely rebuilt. Technically, it is still a map. Practically, it is going to drive you straight into a building that didn't exist 30 years ago. Now, you might be thinking, isn't having $1 million better? Better than not having it, obviously. Yes, nobody's arguing that. But the misconception isn't about whether $1 million is good. It is about the toxic binary thinking the number creates. People either feel like failures because they aren't on track, or they feel bulletproof because they are. Both are dangerous. Here is what actually happens in the real world. Someone with $600,000 saved and a paid-off house in a low-cost city, no debt, and Social Security might live more comfortably in retirement than someone else. Someone with $1.2 million in a 401k, who is still carrying a massive mortgage in Boston, paying for a kid's college loans they co-signed, and dealing with $890 a month in health insurance premiums. Paying all that before Medicare even kicks in. Context completely destroys the clean math every single time. But the financial industry doesn't sell context. It sells fear. And the $1 million number is the perfect fear delivery mechanism. It is round, it is memorable, it is intimidating enough to make you feel inadequate, but just plausible enough to keep you paying advisory fees. The average financial advisor charges between 0.5 and 1% of your total assets under management annually on a $500,000 portfolio. That is $2,500 to $5,000 a year, every single year, whether they beat the market or not, whether they actually do anything for you or not. That fee compounds against you in the exact same way, the same way your investments compound for you. And here is the thing that really gets me. The same industry that invented this one-size-fits-all number is the same industry that charges you money to sit there and tell you you're not hitting it. That is not financial planning. That is a protection racket. A protection racket with a slightly nicer office. I know what you're going to say to me. Isn't it better to aim high and fall short than to aim low and miss? Sure, in theory. But that logic assumes the aiming doesn't cause damage. And it absolutely does cause damage. According to the American Psychological Association, 72% of Americans report feeling stressed about money. Financial anxiety is the #1 source of stress, above your health, above relationships, and above work. And a huge chunk of that crippling anxiety comes from measuring yourself against a flawed benchmark. A benchmark that was never calibrated to your actual life. You are not failing to reach a reasonable goal. You are being measured against an arbitrary number, designed to keep you completely anxious and compliant. There is a massive difference between the two. But it gets worse because the misconceptions don't stop. They don't stop at the $1 million number itself. They extend to who gets there and exactly how. And the story we've been told is almost entirely fiction. The mainstream narrative goes exactly like this. Work hard, save consistently, invest wisely, and one day you'll cross that $1 million finish line. Sounds clean, sounds fair, sounds like a throw pillow. It is also almost completely disconnected from actual reality. According to Vanguard, as 2024 data, only 3.8% of individual 401k accounts have balances over $1 million. 3.8%. Let that sink in. That means for every person who made it, roughly 26 people didn't even come close. And this is among people who actually have a 401k. About 30% of private sector workers don't have access to any employer-sponsored retirement plan. They're not even allowed inside the casino. They're standing outside the building, watching other people lose. Now you might be thinking, well, those 3.8% must be the disciplined ones who sacrificed and saved. The ones who did everything right, and some are. But the actual data tells a completely different story. According to Fidelity, the average 401k balance for someone earning over $150,000 a year is sitting at around $450,000. For someone earning $50,000, it is closer to $38,000. The gap isn't about discipline. It is just about math. You cannot save your way to $1 million. On $50,000 a year, when rent takes 40% of your paycheck before you bought groceries, paid for gas, or covered the $312 premium, the monthly health insurance premium your employer calls affordable. That is like telling someone to fill an Olympic swimming pool using a garden hose with a massive kink in it. The water's technically flowing, but the timeline is absurd. And here is where the real dark math lives. I call it the contribution ceiling trap. The system gives you tools to save for retirement, a 401k, an ERA, and then it caps you. It caps exactly how much you can put in. The 2025 401k limit is $23,500. The ERA limit is $7,000. Combined, that is $30,500 a year in tax-advantaged space. Sounds generous until you realize the brutal truth. Someone earning $60,000 a year would need to save more than half their gross income to max those out, before taxes, before rent, before feeding their kids. Meanwhile, someone pulling in $300,000 can max every account, still take home $15,000 a month after taxes and contributions, and never once have to skip a vacation. The tools are identical, but the ability to use them is not. The system hands everyone the exact same shovel and pretends the people standing on bedrock and the people standing on loose sand have an equal shot at digging to the same depth. But it gets worse, even for aggressive savers. People who save aggressively are getting quietly bled by a mechanism most of them never notice. Fees. The average actively managed mutual fund charges an expense ratio of 0.65%. That might sound tiny, but it is really not. On a $500,000 portfolio over 25 years, a 0.65% fee versus a 0.05% fee costs you approximately $215,000 in lost growth. $215,000 just gone. Not because you made bad investments or the market crashed, because someone skimmed a percentage point off your future every single year and called it a service. And look, I get it. Fees feel abstract. They're buried in prospectus documents, thicker than a phone book. Nobody wakes up angry about expense ratios. But that is the point. The true cost is designed to be completely invisible. You never write a check for it. You never see it leave your account. It just quietly siphons growth from your portfolio. Like a slow leak in a tire, you don't notice until you're stranded on the side of the highway. At 63 years old, wondering where your retirement went. Stack it all up, stagnant wages adjusted for inflation, capped contribution limits that favor high earners, invisible fee structures bleeding portfolios for decades, a benchmark number that hasn't been updated since the Soviet Union still existed, and a financial industry that profits from your confusion. This isn't a savings problem. This is an architecture problem. The entire retirement system in America was not built. It was not built for you to win. It was built for you to participate just enough to feed the corporate machine. And the most dangerous part, the part nobody talks about, the most dangerous part is that you've internalized it. You've absorbed a number that was never yours. You've let a benchmark invented by an industry that constantly profits from your anxiety become the measuring stick for your entire financial identity. And every time you open that retirement app, every time you glance at that balance, every time you do the mental math in the shower, at 6 a.m., you are not evaluating your financial health. You're performing a ritual of self-punishment, designed by someone who charges you a percentage of your misery. Stop. Right now, you are not behind. You were placed behind. There is a difference that changes everything. The person earning $58,000 a year in Indianapolis, with $140,000 in a 401k, and a paid-off Civic, and a $1,100 mortgage, is not failing. They are surviving a system that extracts wealth upward and boldly calls it equal opportunity. The person earning $210,000 in Seattle, with $900,000 in retirement accounts, but $4,200 a month in mortgage payments, $1,800 in childcare, and a leased BMW they can afford. That person is absolutely not winning. They're running on a treadmill someone bolted to the floor. Bolted to the floor of a burning building. The million-dollar mirage doesn't just distort your math. It completely distorts your identity. It makes you see yourself as a saver who isn't saving enough, an investor who isn't investing enough, a worker who isn't earning enough. It turns your entire existence into a massive deficit. And deficits create desperation. Desperation creates bad decisions. Bad decisions create fees, and fees create profits. Massive profits for someone else entirely. That is the loop. That is the architecture. You feel behind, so you chase returns. You chase returns, so you buy actively managed funds with 0.65% expense ratios. You pay those fees for 30 years and lose $215,000 in growth. You end up short of the million-dollar target. And then someone in a nice suit tells you that you should have started earlier, should have saved more, and that you should have been more disciplined. That is like a casino owner lecturing you about self-control, while they designed the carpet pattern to keep you disoriented and pumping oxygen through the vents to keep you awake at 3 a.m. Now, I'm not telling you to stop saving. I am not telling you to blow your 401k on a boat. I'm telling you to reject the framework completely. Here is what actually works. You calculate your number. Yours, not the industry's, not your neighbor's, not the number on a magazine cover from 2004. You take your actual monthly expenses, multiply by 12, and you multiply that by 25. That is your real target based on the 4% rule, applied to your actual life. If you spend $3,500 a month, your number is $1,050,000. If you spend $2,800 a month in a paid-off house in Tennessee, your number is $840,000. If you spend $6,000 a month in Denver with a mortgage and 2 kids still on your health insurance, your personal number is $1,800,000. The number is personal. The moment you make it personal, the fog lifts. Then you stop measuring yourself against complete strangers. The 3.8% who hit $1 million in their 401k, they are not your competition. Your competition is last year's version of you. Did you increase your savings rate by 1%? Did you roll that old 401k into an index fund instead of letting it rot in a target date fund? A target date fund charging 0.45%. Did you stop paying $247 a month for forgotten subscriptions? That is progress, real progress, not performative progress, measured against an imaginary finish line. And here is the thing that really gets me. The retirement industry has convinced an entire generation that their worth as human beings is tied to a portfolio balance, that your value at 65 is determined by a screen, that decades of raising kids and building relationships, learning skills, surviving recessions, showing up every day, somehow Don't count unless there is a seven-figure balance attached. You are not your 401k balance. You never were. Remember that parking lot, the cold burrito, the spinning wheel on your phone. The calculator didn't crash because of a software glitch. It crashed because the question it was trying to answer was never the right question. The right question was never how close am I to $1 million. The right question is what does my actual life cost? And am I building toward that with my eyes open? Nobody sells courses on that. Nobody builds an entire industry around that. Because clarity doesn't generate fees, anxiety does. And that is the whole game.